let's start with this net neutrality stuff, right? Net neutrality. You probably heard about it. You probably tune out when you hear about it. But this is the thing. It's going to affect you, because I don't know of a single human being today in America, or most human beings in the world, who don't use the internet. And this is going to have a direct impact on our use of the internet. And it's more than that. It's our use of Netflix and what we see on television, because the lines between television and the internet are blurring. And this has both to do with net neutrality and with this antitrust lawsuit that the so-called free market Justice Department under Trump is launching against AT&T and Time Warner merger. So all this stuff is really, messed up and all kind of scrunched up together and all related. It's all related, and it all has a direct effect on you, on me, on our kids, on our grandkids, but on us right now in our lives every single day, because we are consumers of the internet every single day. And this is going to have, has already had, and will have a direct impact. Now, what is net neutrality? So net neutrality is the idea that the providers of the cables that come into your house, or the airwaves, the bandwidth that you get on your phone. So AT&T and Verizon when it comes to phone, the cable companies when it comes to cable, even DirecTV potentially, they have to give equal access to everybody who goes onto the internet. They have to make it possible for anybody who puts stuff up on the internet. They have to make that, let's say somebody puts up a new website, or somebody starts a new streaming service, audio, video, whatever. They have to treat all the producers of content and deliverers of services on the internet, they have to treat them equally. They have to not interfere with the delivery of services, right? That's the idea of net neutrality. It's the idea that internet service providers, including cable companies, wireless providers, should treat all internet traffic equally. Let me be really clear, right? This is government intervention into an area the government has no, big capital N, business in. Absolutely no business in. If internet service providers choose to be net neutral, they can be. If they choose not to, and there's an advantage to being net neutral, then they will have an uncompetitive disadvantage. There is no business of the government to tell cable companies or wireless companies how to manage the traffic on their cables or in their spectrum. None of the government's business. Now, so this is government regulation, this is government control. Look, whenever there's a proposal for the government to do something, one has to ask oneself, is this pro-liberty or against liberty? Not, is this good for the economy? Not, is this good for the internet? That's secondary. And actually, if you're pro-liberty, if you understand what liberty actually means, that's always good for the economy and good for the internet. But it's often not understood exactly how. But liberty is freedom. The absence of force over voluntary transactions. Every law needs to be questioned. Does this move us towards more freedom, less government intervention, less force, less control? Or does this move us away from that? Or another way of looking at this. Does this law protect an individual right? Or does it violate it? What individual right does net neutrality as law or as regulation protect? None. None. It is a form of creating, a right to internet, a right to broadband, a right to receiving internet at equal speeds. You don't have a right to any of that stuff. You can't have a right to other people's things. All you have a right to when it comes to the internet is the right to contract with whatever internet service provider you choose to get whatever services you choose to get at the price that they're willing to sell them at to you. You don't have a right to get it at a certain speed, at a certain price dictated by the government. Now, historically, the internet has been neutral because it was internet service providers' interests to be neutral. And they didn't favor some over the others. They provided you with everything at about the same speed. But it's become more and more difficult to do so. You know that 50% of all internet traffic today is basically consumed by two entities, by Netflix and by YouTube, because the streaming video, which is very hungry for bandwidth, and because so many of us consume so many hours of cat videos. Cat videos are really the problem in the world as today. So what internet providers some of them would like to do, not all of them, is to provide certain priorities to certain companies, right? Netflix gets a priority. They pay extra, and they get a priority that they get to deliver their content to you at some guaranteed speed. And if that slows down everybody else, so be it. It slows down everybody else. Right? The internet, let me just say something. The internet is what people make of it. Under freedom. The only job of government in the internet is to protect us from fraud, is to make sure property rights are not violated. It's none of the government's business to establish what kind of business model works on the internet or doesn't work on the internet. It's not the government's job to decide what the quality of information or the quality of anything is on the internet. That's our job as consumers. We get to decide, not the government. And the companies get to decide. All involuntary trade. And those business models that make sense will work, and those that don't. So there was a period in which some of these internet providers were flirting with the idea of providing, in a sense, special access to things like Netflix, but more than just Netflix. Think about emergency services, healthcare, like these bands that people have, monitors that they have on them that can alert a medical professional if there's a problem with their body. One of the things that startups that did that wanted from the internet companies was they wanted to be guaranteed, and they were willing to pay for, immediacy, because these are medical emergencies and they need immediacy. And so they wanted preference in terms of the internet traffic. And ISPs were willing to do that. But then a lot of the big guys, a lot of the big internet companies said, well, wait a minute, we don't want to have our content. We don't have to compete in order to get our content on there. We don't have to. We don't want to have to pay more than Netflix in order to get. We want equal access. It's always been that way, as if the way it's always been has to be continued. So they lobbied, and it was interesting. President Obama got behind this net neutrality, and under Obama, the FCC passed net neutrality laws that basically determined that ISPs, internet service providers, were public utilities. They were equal to the old phone companies. Of course, the government should have never, ever, ever regulated the old phone companies. The whole idea of an FCC is wrong. There shouldn't even be an FCC. They shouldn't be in the business of regulating any of it. But okay, but the idea of treating internet ISPs, internet service providers, as telephone companies with the complete, it's absurd. The internet is so complex as compared to a phone company that has one stream voice. That's it. And this allowed them theoretically to set prices, to determine what content was appropriate. It gave them access to regulating every aspect of the internet. They promised not to do it. They promised they would never do it. But we know those are government promises, empty. Regulators' promises, meaningless. All right. Hey, so we're talking about net neutrality, and let me just say, if you're for liberty, you should be against government interference. You should allow ISPs to discriminate. Yes, you should allow ISPs to decide how much to charge websites, how much to charge service providers, or not. But they get to make a decision on how to use their fiber or their broadband, not you, not the government. So, would I like them to treat everybody the same? Yes. But that's just my preference. I don't have a right to use government force in order to achieve my preference. Neither do you. Neither does the FCC. Neither does President Trump. Neither does anybody, or President Obama in this case, more appropriately. So, no, I am for dismantling the FCC one regulation at a time, getting rid of their controls on ISPs, on internet companies, and so on. And if it turns out that, I don't know, one of the ISPs says we don't like anything that smacks of free market right-wing stuff, and we're going to stop broadcasting that, then they'll stop broadcasting that. All right? Then you'll have to go to some other ISP to get the stuff that you like. You have no right to content. You have no right to be provided with a service. You have no right to be provided with anything. Other than the only right you have is to be left alone, to be protected from those who would use force against us. Against you, sorry. You know, Stewart's saying, that some libertarians say, I'd oppose net neutrality, but local regulations give monopolies to ISPs, so we need more regulations in the form of net neutrality to rein in ISPs. No, you don't solve regulatory problems by creating more regulatory problems. You go fight the regulations. If people have local monopolies, fight the local monopolies. So, this is how we get statism as it is today. There's a regulation we don't like. Everybody has more than one ISP because you have your phone. You're getting broadband on your phone. You've got a cable. Theoretically, you could get DSL. Theoretically, you can get satellite internet. There is competition even on ISPs, and that competition is going to intensify. And without net neutrality, so with net neutrality, since Obama put this rule in place, the FCC under Obama put this rule in place, investment in broadband has gone down. Yeah, I'm not going to invest in broadband if I don't get to control pricing over my lines. So if you want investment, if you want competition, if you want a variety of different ways in which to access the amazing internet that we have, then you want ISPs to have complete pricing control. But you never, ever increase government power in order to solve a problem of too much government power. Now, in this context, let me just say, the government did not invent the internet. The government did not invent the internet. It was DARPA plus a bunch of university professors who invented the network that then became the internet. Universities also exist in private markets. So the internet would have existed whether there was a government intervention or not. And while DARPA is a government entity, it's a defense department and it's a legitimate function of government. But the idea that the internet was invented by government is ludicrous. It's just not true. Right? It's repeated many, many times, and there's some legitimacy to it in the sense that the universities are public universities, and DARPA was a government is a government entity. But the idea that it wouldn't happen without government is ludicrous. Government sucks out all the capital from our economy, and once in a while does something worthwhile. But the internet, as we know it today, was a consequence of the fact of the commercialization that happened on top of this network that was established at primarily the university's level, hooked in with the Defense Department. And that's great. That's great. So, no, the government has no rights over it. The government doesn't regulate it. The government doesn't get to control it. This is a free market. If those servers at those universities, the hubs of the internet, should be sold off, the government should have, public entities should have nothing to do with the internet, period. It doesn't matter. The fact is that certain engineering feats or certain science was discovered using during the government investment in the Apollo project doesn't give the government the right now to regulate all technology. The government should lay their hands off. Let this develop organically. Don't we believe in markets? I thought we believed in markets. I thought people believed in markets. Now, the government intervenes. So let's fight those places where the government intervenes. You don't secure rights by violating rights. You don't secure freedom by violating freedom.